Welcome to Universal Mindset Logic. I'm Logan, the Logic Architect, and I'm here to dismantle the emotional noise and show you the raw code of human performance.
And I'm Lyra. I'm here to ask the uncomfortable questions, the ones you're thinking but not saying out loud. Because here's the thing, most of us want to change. We really do, but we keep hitting the same wall over and over again. We see the red flags in our own behavior, but we don't actually know why they're there.
And that's the problem. People treat symptoms, not systems. Today, we're going deep on 7 concepts of the blueprint, why you keep starting over, to rethink the way you operate, or prove you've been doing it right all along.
Let's not waste time, let's get into it. Okay, so let's start with something everyone struggles with, identity. You say change isn't about doing things, it's about being. That sounds nice, but what does that actually mean? Because I've met plenty of people who say they're something, but their actions tell a completely different story.
Perfect. That's exactly the glitch I'm talking about. Let me give you a real-world example. I knew someone, let's call him Marcus, who spent 2 years saying he was trying to quit smoking. Every Monday, he'd throw away his cigarettes. By Wednesday, he'd buy a new pack. This cycle repeated for 104 weeks straight.
That sounds exhausting.
It was, because every single time he resisted a cigarette, his brain registered it as a loss. He wasn't celebrating freedom, he was mourning the loss of something he believed he needed. Now here's what changed everything. One day, someone asked him, "Are you a smoker?" And instead of saying, "I'm trying to quit," he said, "No, I don't smoke."
Wait, but he was still smoking at that point, right?
He'd had a cigarette that morning, but something shifted in that moment. He didn't say, "I'm quitting," or "I'm trying to quit." He said, "I don't smoke." Present tense, identity statement. And within 3 days, he stopped. Not because it was easy, but because his brain was no longer processing cigarettes as something a non-smoker would even consider.
Okay, but I'm going to push back here. That sounds like he just got lucky. Like maybe he was already ready to quit and this was just the final push. What about someone who's been overweight their entire life? You're telling them to just start calling themselves an athlete? Isn't that delusional?
Here's where people misunderstand the concept. I'm not asking anyone to pretend, I'm asking them to decide. Let me use a different metaphor. Think of your identity like an operating system. Right now, most people are running Overweight Person OS version 12.4. Every decision, every behavior, every habit is running through that operating system.
Okay, I'm following.
When you wake up and the alarm goes off at 5 a.m. for the gym, Overweight Person OS says, "We don't do that. We're not that kind of person. Hit snooze." But if you've upgraded to Athlete OS, even if you're still carrying extra weight, the operating system processes that alarm differently. It says, "This is what we do. This is who we are."
But what if their body doesn't match the identity yet? What if they go to the gym and they can barely run a mile? Don't they feel like a fraud?
That's the beautiful part. An athlete who's out of shape isn't a fraud. They're an athlete in the rebuilding phase. Think about professional athletes coming back from an injury. They're not suddenly not athletes because they can't perform at 100%. They're athletes recovering. The identity doesn't change. The current capability is just a data point.
So you're saying the identity has to come first and the results follow.
Exactly. Because here's the logic. If you wait until you look like an athlete to think like an athlete, you'll never start. The identity is the source code. Everything else is just the output.
Okay, but let's get really practical. Someone's listening right now. They've been overweight for 20 years. They've tried every diet. How do they make that mental flip without feeling like they're lying to themselves?
They start with one decision that aligns with the new identity. Not 10 decisions, one. An athlete drinks water when they're thirsty, not soda. That's it. That's decision number 1. You don't overhaul your entire life on day 1. You make one choice that an athlete would make, then another, and your brain starts building evidence that Athlete OS is the real operating system.
So it's less about the big declaration and more about the small, consistent evidence.
Exactly. Your brain doesn't believe what you say, it believes what you repeatedly do. And here's the red flag most people miss. Every time you say, I'm trying to be healthier, you're telling your brain that the old identity is still in charge. Trying is the language of resistance. I am is the language of identity.
That's a big shift. I can see why people struggle with it.
It's the foundational shift. Everything else we talk about today builds on this.
Which brings up a vital question. If the identity is the internal shift, why are we so obsessed with external validation? Let's talk about something that drives me absolutely crazy: the way everyone posts their goals online. Social media goals. Everyone posts their New Year's resolutions. This year, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. I'm starting a business. I'm going to run a marathon. And then, crickets. Do you think that public declaration helps or hurts?
It actively sabotages them. And I can prove it. There's a phenomenon in psychology called social reality. When you announce a goal publicly, your brain experiences what's called a premature sense of completeness.
What does that mean in normal language?
It means your brain gets a dopamine hit from the announcement, as if you've already achieved the goal. Let me give you an example. There was a study done where two groups of people were told to work toward a goal. Group A told everyone about their goal. Group B kept it private. Group B was significantly more likely to follow through. Why? Because Group A had already received social validation. Their brain had already been rewarded.
So they literally got the reward without doing the work.
Exactly. They spent the fuel before starting the engine. And here's the worst part. Now they have social pressure, but it's the wrong kind of pressure. It's not accountability, it's performance anxiety. They're worried about looking like a failure, which actually makes them less likely to take risks or push through difficulty.
Okay, but what about people who genuinely need external accountability? Like, I know people who will absolutely let themselves off the hook if nobody's watching. Don't they need to announce their goals?
No, they need accountability, not validation. And those are two completely different systems. Validation is posting on Instagram and getting 47 likes and feeling good. Accountability is telling your coach, I'm going to hit the gym 4 times this week, and then reporting back on Sunday with proof.
So the difference is who you're telling and what you're asking from them.
Exactly. If you're telling someone who has stakes in your outcome, a coach, a mentor, a training partner who's also in the trenches, that's accountability. If you're telling strangers who will give you a thumbs up and then forget about you in 30 seconds, that's just dopamine farming.
I love that term, dopamine farming.
That's what it is. And here's the red flag. If you feel the need to announce your goal to the world, ask yourself, am I looking for accountability or applause?
That's a hard question to answer honestly.
It is. But honest answers create real change. Comfortable lies create the same cycle.
So the logic is stay silent, let the pressure build internally, and the only release valve is action.
Precisely. Silence is a strategic vacuum. If you're not releasing pressure through words, you have to release it through action. That's basic physics applied to human behavior.
The logic holds up, but the scale is what scares people. If we're staying silent and working in the dark, how do we handle the sheer size of the mountain? Because when I look at a massive goal, I think, how the hell do I even start? Like, the gap between where I am and where I want to be feels insurmountable. The mountain is too big.
And that's where 90% of people quit before they even start. They look at the summit and forget that mountains aren't climbed in one jump. Let me tell you about a concept that changed my entire perspective. James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits, but the math behind it is what makes it undeniable. If you improve by just 1% every single day for 1 year, you don't end up 365% better.
You don't?
No, you end up 37 times better. The formula is simple. 1.01 to the power of 365 equals 37.78. But here's the flip side. If you get 1% worse every day, by the end of the year, you're nearly at zero. 0.99 to the power of 365 equals 0.03.
That's terrifying.
It should be, because it means the small decisions compound in both directions. But here's why most people don't believe in the 1% rule. Our brains are wired for linear thinking, not exponential thinking.
What do you mean?
Okay, imagine I give you 2 options. Option A, I give you $1 million today.
Option B, I give you 1 penny today and I double it every day for 30 days. Which do you take?
Most people would take the million, right?
Most people do. But if you take the penny and let it double for 30 days, you end up with over $5 million. That's exponential growth. But on day 10, you only have $5.12. On day 20, you have $5,242. It doesn't feel significant until the very end, and that's why people quit.
Because they're on day 10 looking at their $5 and thinking this is pointless.
Exactly. They don't see the curve. They only see the slow start. So they abandon the process and chase something that feels like progress. But feelings lie. Math doesn't.
Okay, but let's get real here. How do you actually measure 1% improvement? Like, if I'm trying to build a business, what does 1% better look like today versus yesterday?
Great question. And this is where people overcomplicate it. 1% isn't about precision. It's about direction. If you're building a business, 1% might mean making one more sales call than yesterday. If you're building strength, it's one more rep. If you're building a skill, it's 10 more minutes of practice. The point isn't to obsess over the exact percentage. The point is to establish a baseline and improve on it consistently.
So it's more about the habit of improvement than the exact measurement.
Exactly, because here's what happens. Most people try to make a 50% jump in one day. They're sedentary, and suddenly they're at the gym for 2 hours. They burn out by Thursday. But if you just add one small thing, your system doesn't reject it, it integrates it.
But what about plateaus? What if you're doing the 1% every day and you stop seeing results? I feel like that's where people actually quit.
Then you've hit a skill ceiling, and you need to change the input. Let's use weightlifting as an example. If you're doing the same workout every day and you plateau, it's not because the 1% rule doesn't work, it's because you're no longer introducing a new stimulus. You need to change the exercise, increase the weight, or adjust your recovery. The plateau isn't failure, it's data telling you to adjust the variable.
So even plateaus are just feedback.
Everything is feedback. That's the mindset shift. There's no such thing as wasted effort if you're learning from the result.
I like that. Okay, so the red flag here is trying to make massive leaps instead of trusting the compound effect of small, consistent improvements.
Exactly. Perfectionism kills momentum. The 1% rule builds it.
It's a powerful philosophy, Logan, but philosophy usually hits a wall when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m. Let's talk about the thing everyone loves to hate: motivation. People watch motivational videos on YouTube, they listen to pump-up playlists, they get fired up on Monday morning, and then by Wednesday afternoon, they're back on the couch eating chips. What's the deal with motivation?
Motivation is a drug, and like any drug, it gives you a temporary high followed by a crash. The problem is people build their entire system on that high. They wait until they feel like it before they act, and that's the red flag: emotional governance.
Okay, break that down. What do you mean by emotional governance?
It means letting your feelings dictate your actions. Think about it like this. Your emotions are weather patterns. Some days it's sunny, some days it's storming. If you only work on sunny days, you're going to have a very inconsistent output. Motivation is the same. It's unstable, it's unpredictable, and it's completely outside your control.
So, what's the alternative? Just force yourself to do things even when you feel terrible?
Not force, commit. There's a difference. Let me give you a real example. I knew a guy, let's call him David, who wanted to write a book. Every day he'd wait until he felt inspired to write. Some weeks he'd write 10,000 words, other weeks, 0. After 2 years, he had a bunch of disconnected chapters and no finished book.
Okay, so what changed?
He stopped waiting for inspiration. He committed to writing 500 words a day, every single day, no exceptions. Some days, those 500 words were brilliant. Other days, they were garbage. But here's what happened. After 365 days, he had 182,500 words. He had a finished manuscript, and about 60% of it was actually good. He went back, edited out the bad parts, and published the book.
So, discipline filled in the gaps that motivation couldn't.
Exactly. Motivation is the highlight reel. Discipline is the full season. And here's the key insight. Motivation follows action more often than action follows motivation.
Wait, say that again?
Motivation follows action Most people think they need to feel motivated before they act, but the truth is, action creates motivation. You start the task, and 5 minutes in, you find your rhythm. The resistance was in the starting, not the doing.
Okay, but I'm going to push back here. What about people who are genuinely struggling? Like they're depressed, they're burnt out, they're going through something heavy. You're telling them their feelings don't matter? That feels kind of cold.
No, I'm telling them their feelings are data, not directives. If you're burnt out, that's critical information. Your system is telling you something is wrong. But the solution isn't to wait until you feel better to take action. The solution is to take small, disciplined actions because you feel bad. Action changes state.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, let's say you're depressed. You don't feel like getting out of bed. Waiting until you feel motivated to get up is a trap because depression doesn't work that way. But if you commit to one small action, get up, drink a glass of water, step outside for 2 minutes, you've changed your state. You've introduced a new input. And often that tiny action creates a micro shift in how you feel.
So, it's not about ignoring your feelings, it's about not letting them be the only factor in your decision making.
Exactly. Your feelings are important, but they're not the CEO. They're part of the advisory board. And here's the thing. Your identity, the one we talked about in segment 1, doesn't care about your feelings. The athlete doesn't ask, do I feel like training today? They just train because that's what athletes do.
So, discipline is really just the logical extension of identity.
Perfectly said. Discipline is identity in motion.
Okay, last question on this. How do you actually build discipline when you've been running on motivation your whole life? Like, where do you even start?
You start with proof. You prove to yourself that you can do something small even when you don't feel like it. One push-up, one page, one phone call, and then you stack those wins. Every time you follow through on a commitment to yourself, you build trust with yourself, and that trust is the foundation of discipline.
So, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And just like a muscle, you don't start by benching 300 pounds. You start with the bar. You start with body weight. You build progressively. Same thing with discipline.
That buildup of discipline is vital, but I see people doing the work while their internal engine is overheating. They show up every day, but they're miserable because their heads are full of mental clutter, old arguments, future worries, things they can't control. Why does this happen?
Because they're operating with a full hard drive. Here's the red flag: resource misallocation. Your brain has a finite amount of processing power. If 40% of your mental RAM is occupied by things you can't control, you're operating at 60% capacity.
Okay, so what's the solution? Like, you can't just delete thoughts.
No, but you can choose not to run simulations on them. Let me explain. Every time you replay an argument from 3 years ago or stress about a meeting that's 2 weeks away, your brain is running a full simulation. It's using real energy on a scenario that either already happened or might never happen.
So, what do you do instead?
You install a filter. Every time a thought pops up, you ask, is this useful? Does this help me solve a problem or learn a lesson? If the answer is no, you acknowledge it and let it go. You don't engage, you don't argue with it. You just observe it and release it.
That sounds like meditation.
It's similar, but it's more tactical. Meditation is about clearing the mind. This is about prioritizing the mind. Think of it like email. If you read and respond to every single email, you'll never get anything done. But if you filter out spam and only respond to what's important, you're efficient.
So, you're basically saying most of our thoughts are mental spam.
A huge percentage of them, yes. And the problem is, most people treat every thought like it's urgent. They engage with every worry, every regret, every hypothetical scenario, and it drains them.
Okay, but here's my question. What if the thought keeps coming back? Like you try to let it go, but it just won't leave you alone.
Then it's not spam, it's signal. If a thought keeps returning, your brain is trying to tell you something. Maybe there's an unresolved issue. Maybe there's a lesson you haven't learned. In that case, you schedule time to actually deal with it. You don't let it interrupt your day, but you also don't ignore it. You say, okay, I'll sit with this tonight for 20 minutes and figure out what I need to do.
So it's about control. You're not ignoring your thoughts, but you're deciding when and how to engage with them.
Exactly. That's the logic. Your thoughts don't get to hijack your day. You allocate time and energy to them intentionally.
I really like that framework. It feels practical.
It is. And here's the result. When you stop wasting energy on mental static, you have more energy for the things that actually move your life forward.
Having that extra energy is a huge advantage, but only if you know where to point it. At this point, someone listening might be thinking, great, I'm going to fix everything at once. Is that a good idea?
Absolutely not. That's the red flag of multitasking, and it's one of the most common mistakes high performers make.
Wait, why is that a mistake? Shouldn't we be maximizing our efforts?
No, we should be maximizing our focus. Here's the principle: the power of one. One goal, one primary focus, one major identity shift at a time. Because when you scatter your light, you get a dim glow. When you focus it, you get a laser.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Sure. Let's say someone wants to lose weight, start a business, learn a new language, and fix their relationship all at the same time. Sounds ambitious, right?
Sounds overwhelming.
Exactly, because each of those goals requires energy, attention, and consistency. If you split your energy 4 ways, you're giving 25% to each, and 25% effort rarely produces meaningful results. But if you focus 100% of your energy on one goal, let's say losing weight, and you make that your primary identity shift, everything else starts to align.
How?
Because the skills you build in one area transfer. The discipline you develop waking up early to work out, that same discipline helps you wake up early to work on your business. The mental clarity you gain from eating better, that helps your relationship. The confidence you build from hitting your goals, that shows up everywhere.
So it's more about the habit of improvement than the exact measurement.
Exactly. Because here's what happens. Most people try to make a 50% jump in one day. They're sedentary and suddenly they're at the gym for 2 hours. They burn out by Thursday. But if you just add one small thing, your system doesn't reject it, it integrates it.
So it's not about doing less, it's about sequencing correctly. Master one thing, let it compound, then move to the next. That's a completely different approach than what most people do.
Most people fail because they try to do everything at once. High performers succeed because they do one thing until it's done.
Focusing on one thing sounds simple, but it feels incredibly risky when you're terrified of failing. Let's talk about that last hurdle. Even if someone does everything we've talked about, how do they deal with the moment things actually go wrong? Redefining failure. Because even if someone does everything we've talked about, they're still going to fail sometimes. And that's usually where people give up. So how do you deal with failure?
By redefining it, most people see failure as a verdict. I see it as data, and that distinction changes everything. Let's say you try a new business strategy and it doesn't work. Most people label that as I failed. And once you've labeled it as failure, your brain attaches shame, disappointment, frustration. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I should quit.
That sounds familiar.
But here's the reframe. You didn't fail. You ran an experiment. You tested a hypothesis. The result wasn't what you expected, but now you have information you didn't have before. That's not failure. That's data.
Okay, but that feels like semantic games. Like you still didn't get the result you wanted.
True, but the result isn't the point. The learning is the point. Let me give you a real example. Thomas Edison tested over 1,000 materials before he found the right filament for the light bulb. Someone asked him, "How did you handle failing 1,000 times?" And he said, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. I successfully discovered 1,000 ways that don't work."
That's a mindset shift.
It's the only mindset that allows for innovation, because here's the logic. Action leads to result. Result leads to adjustment. If you're not willing to accept unexpected results, you're not willing to learn. And if you're not willing to learn, you're not going to grow.
So the red flag is labeling a lesson as a loss.
Exactly. Every outcome is either a success or a lesson. There's no third category.
Okay, but what about when someone keeps failing at the same thing over and over? Like at what point do you say, maybe this isn't for me?
That's a great question. And the answer is, when you've exhausted all reasonable variables. If you've tried 50 different approaches and none of them work, that's data telling you the strategy needs to change. But most people quit after 3 attempts. They don't fail because the goal was wrong. They fail because they didn't iterate enough.
So persistence matters, but intelligent persistence matters more. I love that. So failure isn't the opposite of success, it's part of the process.
Exactly. It's not about banging your head against the wall. It's about testing, learning, adjusting, and testing again. That's the scientific method applied to life. It's the only way to get there.
All right, let's bring this home. We've covered a lot today. The red flags are clear. We're fighting our own identity. We're announcing goals or validation instead of staying silent. We're chasing motivation instead of building discipline. We're cluttering our minds with things we can't control. We're trying to do everything instead of mastering one thing. And we're treating failure like a verdict instead of data.
Here's the blueprint. Shift your identity first. Stop talking about what you're going to do. Focus on the boring 1% every single day. Build discipline so you don't need to rely on motivation. Clear the mental clutter. Focus on one thing at a time. And when you fail, because you will, treat it like the valuable information it is.
This is Universal Mindset Logic. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Stay logical.